Welcome to the Breakthrough Innovation Programme. The topic for this session is the cost model. I'm going to walk through some perspectives on how streamlining activities and resources, doing things in new ways, and placing some renewed focus on the cost structure could be a source of innovation and competitive advantage for your business. The topic for this session is the cost model. I'm going to walk through. Costs should be minimised in every business model, but low-cost structures are more important in some business models than in others. It's therefore useful to distinguish between two broad classes of business model cost structure. Cost-driven business models focus on creating and maintaining the leanest possible cost structure using low-priced value propositions, maximum automation and extensive outsourcing. No-frills or budget hotels typify cost-driven business models. Value-based business models are less concerned with the cost implications of a particular business model design and instead focus on value creation. Premium value propositions and a high degree of personalised service usually characterise value-driven business models. Luxury hotels, with their lavish facilities and exclusive services, fall into that category. Most business models fall in between the two extremes, somewhere along the spectrum. Where does your business sit? Are you more a cost-driven or cost-advantage business, aiming to offer customers the best price? Or are you more focused on value and differentiation, at whatever cost, within reason obviously, aiming to recoup that cost plus margin from customers who value the superiority or differentiation? Regardless of where you sit, perhaps there's an opportunity to make innovative changes to your cost structure to give you an advantage in the marketplace. So what are the sources of cost advantage? There are 6 primary sources: economies of scale, economies of scope, learning and experience, proprietary knowledge, lower input costs, and different business models or value chains. Let's look briefly at each in turn. Economies of scale come about when an increase in production or an increase in the number of customers served for a service business, when that increase lowers the company's average cost per unit produced or sold. Economies can be noticed in manufacturing, R&D, marketing, distribution, etc., and they arise from 4 principal sources. Firstly, the ability to spread fixed costs of production. The cost of plant and equipment can be spread over more output, thereby lowering the cost per unit. In many activities, increases in output don't require proportionate increases in input. For example, a car manufacturer building a plant that can produce 100,000 cars doesn't necessarily cost 5 times the cost of a 20,000 car plant. Tesla is a good example. To address the prohibitive cost of battery packs for its electric cars due to a lack of development in the space, Tesla itself invested in a massive gigafactory to produce the battery packs itself, thus saving an estimated 30% on the cost of batteries because of the scale at which they are producing. The second source of economies of scale is the ability to spread non-production costs. So large volumes enable companies to spread the costs of R&D, advertising, general and admin expenses such as accounting, finance and HR. The higher the firm's R&D costs, for example, as a percentage of sales, the more incentive they have to expand globally to spread those costs across more customers. The third source is specialisation of machines and equipment. A company with high volumes of production is often able to purchase new specialised equipment or tools or automated machines that small companies simply can't afford due to their lower production volumes. For example, in the ball bearing industry, the lowest cost way to produce fewer than 100 rings is to do it on general purpose laths. And as volume increases, a specialised screw machine is more efficient. And where volume is over 1 million, companies can afford to purchase an even more specialised, high-speed, continuous process machine that further lowers the cost per unit. The fourth source of economies of scale is specialisation of tasks and people. When work tasks are specialised, workers become more and more efficient at a particular task. This was Henry Ford's major breakthrough in the mass production of cars, breaking down the production process into a series of separate tasks that can be performed by highly trained and specialised workers. The value of employees specialisation occurs not just in manufacturing environments, but also in knowledge industries, such as management consulting or investment banking and the legal profession, where the specialisation of labour permits larger companies to offer a wide variety and deeper expertise to potential clients. Small companies don't have the volume necessary to justify high levels of employee specialisation, hence they often outsource to subcontractors. One consideration for companies is how much fixed costs can shift to variable costs. One way of doing this is to outsource some activities to a lower cost provider, for example IT to India. The cost will then be varied according to how much the company uses the subcontractor services. Another way to convert fixed to variable costs is by leasing equipment on a short-term basis. Economies of scope is the second possible source of cost advantage. Economies of scope occur whenever a company can produce two related products at a cost that's lower than if each product was produced separately. This occurs when some of the activities required for each different business line are not completely unrelated. So you can reduce costs through the clever use of existing production, logistics and sales processes, and at the same time increase sales. An example of this might be a single reporter at a media company. They can write a news story that appears in print and online, conduct a video interview with a source that can be used in a story on the same topic airing on TV, and promote the story via the reporter's social media handles. The fact that a single reporter creates content for 4 different outlets, print, TV, internet and social media, reduces the total cost of production and makes it possible to offer these media services at lower cost to subscribers and others buying the media products. The idea behind economies of scope is to exploit synergies. So the products that you offer, in addition to your existing portfolio, should have a certain proximity to the products you already offer. This way you can rely on already existing processes for production and costs are lower than with a completely different kind of product. A fantastic recent example of this are the many distilleries and breweries who began producing hand sanitizer as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. They very successfully used existing factors in their companies for the additional production. For example, though not the same product, the staff at distilleries have important know-how and knowledge which can be transferred and applied, thereby creating synergy effects. Their machines, equipment and production lines could be repurposed with little effort, totally saving on acquisition and maintenance costs. There's even overlap in the ingredients used. They use existing warehouses and means of transport and routes to deliver the hand sanitizer, perhaps not to the same customers, but to the same geographic locations. Other areas where economies of scope could be exploited include marketing and distribution, or technologies in R&D. Google, for example, invests deeply in R&D, which has led to economies of scope because it has resulted in a great deal of product diversification for the company. From a marketing perspective, when a newly launched product profits from the good reputation of another product, market entry is easier in such a case than for a completely unknown company with a similar product, a subtler form of economies of scope. And finally, the exploitation of newly developed technologies by selling or licensing to other companies is another example of a subtle economy of scope to be considered. The third source of cost advantage is learning and experience. The basis for this is that people tend to perform tasks more efficiently the more a task is repeated, and they also become more effective as they learn better ways to complete tasks. So employee learning contributes to reductions in cost per unit delivered. This holds true for service industries as well. The learning effect on costs occurs more rapidly in the early stages of a company because more obvious opportunities to reduce costs present themselves early in the experience of a company. And after these easy changes are adopted, gains from learning and experience come in smaller increments. Apple is a good example. Its ability to simultaneously grow market share while increasing profits is due to its depth of experience and knowledge in the marketplace, and thus its ability to continuously innovate on product features that will sell. Amazon Web Services is another example. They develop new technology for use on Amazon's own services, and then having learned and gained experience, they then later make this available to their customers via AWS. So artificial intelligence, image recognition, natural language processing, machine learning. Understanding the impact on cost of various strategies comes with learning and experience. So as a company becomes more experienced, it's in a better place to make practical decisions about growth and investment strategies, for example, or pricing strategies, and even acquisition strategies. In a fast-moving market, first movers tend to secure a widening cost advantage. So companies in these industries have an imperative to move faster than competitors, so they don't end up at a cost disadvantage. General Electric has been known to have its business units follow the philosophy be number one or number two or exit, because they mainly operate in industries where the cost per unit decreases with increases in cumulative volume of production. So it's difficult to be profitable if the business unit is not number one or number two in unit volumes. If higher unit volumes will produce lower cost per unit, the company may want to price its product or service aggressively low at the outset so that it can gain enough market share to reach those higher volumes. Hyundai has been described as a company that prices aggressively to gain market share in order to lower its future cost per unit. And as a result of this strategy, their share tripled in the US over the course of a number of years. The strategy, however, only works because they were the only one doing it in their industry. Cost synergies may occur if costs decrease as a result of two companies combining their volume or scale. Guesttech, a company that delivers internet services to hotel rooms, saw an opportunity to lower its cost per room with the purchase of a competitor called GoldenTree. They did an analysis of the operating cost per room, and that analysis showed them that with each doubling of rooms, they benefited from a 29% decrease in the cost per room, and the purchase of GoldenTree would almost double the number of rooms serviced. Of course, there are costs associated with integrating operations of two separate companies, but the analysis gave Guesttech some idea of the cost synergies it would likely generate. It went ahead with the acquisition, achieved the cost synergies, and that led. In some cases, companies are able to achieve a cost advantage due to proprietary knowledge that is independent of scale or output. Indian car manufacturer Tata designed the low-cost Nano car in a unique way, using a specially designed 35 horsepower rear-mounted engine. Tata developed some important proprietary knowledge in designing the low-cost vehicle, some of which is protected by the 34 patents it applied for when it completed the design. We'll speak more about Tata in a couple of moments. We mentioned the Toyota production system in the core delivery process module, worth mentioning here again in the context of proprietary knowledge. The core techniques inherent in the process are not protected by patents, but by trade secrets, and that fact can make it even harder to replicate. The fifth source of potential cost advantage is lower input costs. When we talk about inputs, we're talking about raw materials, supplies, parts, equipment, labour, capital, land, depending on your business. In some situations, companies can achieve a cost advantage through lower cost inputs compared to competitors, and this can be achieved in one of four ways. The first is bargaining power over suppliers. Suppliers typically can be expected to drop prices when buyers increase their volume of purchases, because they themselves benefit from economies of scale and the law of experience, so can lower their prices accordingly. Negotiation skills and purchasing tactics can also play a part. Walmart, for example, in the US, spreads its purchases across numerous suppliers so that no one supplier has a dominant share of any particular product category. Walmart has been known to willingly drop a supplier's product if another supplier's price is better. These practices let suppliers know that they are expendable, which creates an incentive for suppliers to always give Walmart their best price. The second is cooperation with suppliers. Rather than strong-arming suppliers into offering lower prices, cost advantages can be achieved by working cooperatively with suppliers. Toyota is known for this. They have a two-vendor policy. It typically only works with two partner suppliers of a particular input. By working with a smaller number of suppliers, Toyota is able to devote resources to make sure it coordinates very effectively with these particular suppliers. They've even been known to send their own engineers, experts in TPS, to help suppliers implement more efficient manufacturing processes to lower their costs. As a result of this close relationship, many suppliers build their manufacturing plants close to Toyota's assembly plants, thus lowering the cost of transportation, logistics and communications. The third source is location advantages. So the price of inputs can vary significantly between locations because of differences in wage rates, exchange rates, or raw material or energy costs. Way back in the 70s, when Nike entered the athletic footwear industry, Adidas had been the world leader. Adidas produced high-quality shoes primarily in Europe, where labour rates were high, $20 per hour in 1990. Nike decided to source all of its shoes from Asia, starting in Korea, which was $2.50 an hour, and later in China and Indonesia, down to 50 cents per hour. Nike used the cost saving to invest in marketing, athlete endorsers and shoe design, a strategy of differentiation enabled by lower cost advantage. And the fourth area is preferred access to inputs. Some companies are in a better position to access particular inputs more easily than other companies. For example, drilling oil in Saudi Arabia requires only the simplest drilling technologies because drilling is less complicated in the desert and oil is more frequently found relatively close to the surface. So oil companies in Saudi Arabia can access oil more cheaply than most oil companies. In a similar fashion, the diamond company De Beers has historically had preferred access to diamonds because De Beers owns and controls the output of a large percentage of the world's diamond mines. Airbnb has a radically lighter cost structure than the hotel chains with which it competes, primarily because of lower cost inputs. It doesn't own any of the rooms it lists, nor does it manage a large hospitality staff. Its main costs are platform management and marketing. In 2018, Airbnb accounted for 29% of US and European consumer spending on accommodation, and its success is largely based on a resource-light cost structure. A final way to achieve a cost advantage is to implement an entirely different business model or set of activities to deliver your offering. You can attack the business model or value chain in a number of ways. The first is by eliminating activities or steps in the value chain. One reason Ryanair has a cost advantage over other airlines in Europe is because it doesn't offer any in-flight meals, blankets or even sick bags, avoiding the cost of the products themselves and the labour costs associated with delivering them. They use secondary airports that charge lower fees. They use one model of aircraft with simple cabin configuration to reduce maintenance and training costs. They minimise the time aircraft are on the ground and not generating revenues, and they bypass the travel agent by selling direct to customers. Panasonic is another example. They've long had a cost advantage over competitor Sony because they opt to spend only half as much as Sony does on R&D. So rather than lead in product development, Panasonic follows, largely by imitating Sony's technologies. Panasonic also spends less than Sony does on advertising, and this allows Panasonic to have lower costs and lower prices for comparable products sold in electronics stores. The second way is by disrupting the value chain altogether. In 1995, Amazon completely disrupted the book-selling industry. Rather than building superstores, hiring staff for the stores, and buying storage and storing huge volumes of inventory, Amazon built a few large warehouses, took and processed orders online, and shipped directly to the customers' homes. This is essentially what Airbnb did also. They launched a platform that feels like a hotel chain but owns no properties, instead connecting travellers with owners of idle assets. When WhatsApp launched its device-agnostic free messaging service and platform in 2009, it disrupted the then very competitive SMS messaging market dominated by the telcos. They piggybacked on the user's smartphone connection rather than relying on the telco's network infrastructure, thus eliminating hardware and proprietary infrastructure costs. So they used technology in a radically new way to create a game-changing cost structure. As mentioned a few moments ago, the Tata Nano is not a success story. But it's a very interesting case study of a company which attempted to launch an innovative product and compete on the basis of cost advantage. It launched in 2009 and was essentially gone by 2018. But its beginnings, One rainy day in Mumbai, India in 2003, Ratan Tata, the former chairman of the Tata Group, noticed a man riding a scooter with an older child standing in the front, behind the handlebars. The man's wife sat side saddle on the back of the scooter with another child on her lap, and all four were soaked to the bone. And as he watched, he asked himself, why can't this family own a car and avoid the rain? And then he realised that, like over 700 million Indians who made less than $10,000 a year, they probably couldn't afford one. So he began to dwell on the possibility of creating an affordable people's car, a safer form of transport. Tata gathered a small number of engineers to design a low-cost vehicle with four wheels. The initial design had two soft doors with vinyl windows, a cloth roof and a metal bar as a safety measure. But after seeing the initial designs, Tata and his group concluded that the market wouldn't want a half car. So Tata and his team spent the next several years designing a real car that would use the least expensive materials and the least expensive components and would be assembled with minimal skill in the fewest possible labour hours. His dream became reality in 2009 with the launch of the Tata Nano, priced at $2,500. It was designed to only weigh 1,320 pounds and get 50 miles per gallon, and it's powered by a rear-mounted 35 horsepower engine. The Nano also sported numerous inventions, including 34 for which a patent was applied, and that made it India's Car of the Year in 2010. And beyond designing a car that could be manufactured at low cost, he also thought about how the cars could be distributed at low cost. It was designed to be assembled from kits in dealerships. And this approach alone could disrupt the entire automobile distribution system in India. Tata needed a way to reach customers in the small villages in India, where Indians primarily drove scooters, to be able to sell its cars as inexpensively as possible in the smaller villages in India. And he decided against building dealerships. There simply wasn't enough market for that. Instead, he imitated the strategy of companies that sold scooters. Scooter dealers arrived on Sundays at farmers' markets or flea markets with big trucks filled with scooters and set out the scooters in rows for people to buy immediately. And the Tata team brought 40 nanos at a time to each open-air market and provided services so customers could see the car, learn how to operate it, get a licence, buy insurance and drive it home the same day. And this approach allowed Tata to eliminate the typical dealership overhead costs required to sell cars, savings it could then pass on to the customers. The Tata Nano case illustrates how a company can clearly define its unique value as being low cost, after which it then develops the resources and capabilities to deliver its product at the lowest possible cost. During the first few months after launching the Nano, Tata received orders for almost 200,000 units, a solid start for an all-new. So why did it not succeed? It was heralded as the world's cheapest car and was expected to appeal to very price-sensitive Indian customers. But between 2009 and 2013, sales were far lower than expected. In 2010, around 9,000 units of the Nano were sold, and since then, things have been steadily going downhill. By 2011, Tata Motors was selling a mere 500 units a year. And this drop in sales can be attributed to various reasons, the foremost being safety. In 2010, a Nano caught fire in Mumbai, and over the next few months, several such incidents were reported. And although they made several attempts right up to 2018 to reposition the car, for example, as the first car for young people in a city, there was a stigma attached to buying the cheapest car, and that proved to be its undoing. Most observers point to that fact, that the Nano was marketed as the most affordable car available. So the image of the cheapest car meant that people didn't want association with something cheap. It's perhaps an important lesson on how to position a low-cost product, particularly when customers consider a broader set of factors beyond price when purchasing. So positioning a product at a lower price in the market may give the impression of a lower quality product, when in fact the lower price might just be the result of a cost advantage. So are there perhaps other differentiators that the marketing message and image should focus on? It's perhaps interesting and informative to take a very quick look at an example of an industry whose structure changed as a result of challenging key assets and core competencies. Mobile telecoms companies started unbundling their businesses 15 or 20 years ago when they realised that their key asset was no longer the network itself. One of the first mobile telcos to pursue strategic unbundling was Bharti Airtel, a leading telco in India. It outsourced network operations to Ericsson and Nokia Siemens networks and IT infrastructure to IBM, allowing the company to focus on its core competency, building customer relationships and brand. The equipment manufacturers were able to run the network at lower cost because they serviced several telcos at a time and thus benefited from economies of scale. France Telecom, KPN and Vodafone quickly followed suit. A final case study worth looking at briefly is Lineage Logistics. It's currently the fastest growing and most innovative company in the temperature-controlled logistics industry, which stores, transports and delivers chilled foods. In 2015, when Greg Lamecool took over as CEO, he challenged his team to dramatically change the amount of energy that's consumed in a temperature-controlled supply chain. At that time, they were expending as much energy each year as 50,000 households. 2018 was a big year of innovation for Lineage Logistics. Lineage's mathematicians, physicists and engineers made great strides in using data science to optimize operations. In July, it secured its first patent for an algorithm that uses LiDAR scans of warehouses to determine the most space-efficient way to store pallets, helping the company pack an extra 800 square feet of product into its existing 162 buildings, effectively saving $40 million in warehousing costs. They were also able to cut the overall energy consumption by 34% over 3 years by installing thousands of internet-connected temperature sensors in its warehouses and using AI to regulate refrigeration throughout the day, saving over $4 million annually. The company piloted Lineage Link, its trucking software, at the end of 2018, and that software automates packing, routes and deliveries, reducing the company's loading and unloading processes from 3 or 4 hours to around 45 minutes. So these advances have attracted new customers, including Amazon, Pepsi and Sonic, and they helped Lineage surpass 1.4 billion in revenues in 2018, up 38% from 2017. And all of this happened from a challenge to change the status quo. Every company's cost structure, so the components that make up its cost base, are somewhat unique to that company, or certainly to the industry. So let's take a look at Google's cost structure as an example. Historically, Google's cost elements can be divided into 4 main categories: so R&D, data center operations, traffic acquisition, and sales and marketing. So Google invests deeply in R&D with the purpose of bringing around improvements to its existing products and constantly creating new and innovative solutions. That expenditure has helped Google maintain its position at the top, despite the typical short-lived cycles of popularity of most internet-based successes, and that has led to economies of scope for Google, as already explained. It's also speculated that Google has almost 1 million servers globally, and these servers help process around 1 billion search requests daily. Google has invested a great deal into these data centers, and they represent a significant fixed cost for the company. Even the management of the servers represents a major cost. However, due to the high volume of searches these centers process, they're able to increase economies of scale for the company by optimizing the server's search capacities. Traffic acquisition costs refer to the money given to the Google network through its AdSense program, or to websites which redirect users to Google or provide the Google toolbar to their customers. And all of these players help Google in attracting more and more users to its products and services daily. And finally, Google invests in advertising and marketing to the wide customer base it's targeting. Those costs also include the worldwide sales force that Google maintains, which aims to sell its campaigns, as well as its support team, which are available to handle customer complaints and hiccups. So the question for you at this stage: what are your main cost components? And is there scope to innovate around them to gain cost advantage? Is there any way you could change your cost structure significantly by creating and delivering value with different or differently configured resources and activities? The Breakthrough Innovation Capability Diagnostic asked you a number of questions around your cost model. It asked around whether innovations in your company's products, services or operations has led to any significant cost reduction in the last few years, whether your costs are predictable, whether you maintain a lean cost structure, whether you benefit from economies of scale or economies of scope, whether it's likely that your costs will grow more quickly than your revenues can support, and whether you've exhausted all opportunities to increase employee productivity, reduce employee attrition and recruitment costs, and whether you've exhausted all opportunities to reduce the cost of operations and processes. What is the report telling you about your cost structure? Is it conventional or disruptive? Is there scope to think about ways to configure resources, assets and activities differently? One of your tasks for the next online session is to think about this and present it back to the group. To help with brainstorming some innovative changes you could consider, we've summarised some of the examples we've spoken about and captured them on a Spark card. Use this Spark card to help challenge your current thinking on your own cost model. Jot down your current main cost components in the business. What's driving them? What did the Breakthrough Innovation Capability Diagnostic confirm to you about your existing cost model? Now also think outside the box and come up with some creative ideas on how you could radically alter the cost structure of your business to gain cost advantage.